But cracking an Islamist almost always required a second key, a way to penetrate a religious code designed to keep outsiders away. Abu Mutaz knew the Quran as well as almost any jihadi, and sometimes he sat for hours with a single detainee, matching him verse for verse in endless theological debates. More than once during these sessions, he would excuse himself for a few hours on the pretense of attending prayers at the local mosque. Instead, he would skip across town to fortify himself with a beer or two at a hotel bar. The job also required extraordinary patience, a quality with which Abu Mutaz was naturally gifted. Once he worked for 4 months to win over a single jihadist, a young radical who showed promise as a potential informant. The youth appeared to be a fence straddler. He had trained as a militant in Afghanistan, yet he remained attached to his family and secular life in Jordan. Abu Mutaz decided to pressure the young man through his parents, so he staked out the neighborhood to learn all he could about the man's mother, including the stores she visited. He found the woman's favorite grocery store and then began cultivating a friendship with the shop owner. One morning, he arrived at the shop with a basket of squabs, domestic pigeons, a delicacy in Jordan, and asked the grocer to host a special luncheon inviting the jihadist, his mother, and Abu Mutaz himself as guests. As lunch was ending, the Muhabbarat's agent took the mother aside and asked for help in keeping her obviously bright, talented son from ending up in the spy agency's prisons. The two became friends, and the son, ever dutiful, became one of Abu Mutaz's best informants. Now Abu Mutaz called in every chip and leaned on every neighborhood gossip on the payroll to come up with something concrete about what he had come to fear was a major terrorist plot. The entire Mukhabarat, with its plodding low tech efficiency, was now engaged in the search. Word spread through tribal networks and village councils that the agency's men were desperately seeking information to head off a possible attack. The big break came from a walk in, an Irbid businessman who showed up at the local police precinct with a possible tip. The man had heard about the Mukhabbarat's search and wondered if his newest tenants might be somehow linked. He had recently rented a garage and warehouse on the main Irbi Daman highway to strangers who paid in cash and were oddly vague about their plans. No customers ever came around, and the renters were oddly secretive, covering up the road fronting windows and erecting a fence around the property at their own expense. Once, during a visit to his property, the man had managed a quick peek through a gap in the window coverings. There is a large truck inside, the man told police. Police swooped into the warehouse, surprising a small handful of workers who gave up without a struggle. In an interior storage room, lined up like stacks of paint cans, were barrels of chemical precursors enough, the Muhabbarat's men figured, to level a large swath of central Oman. Sacks of cumin seed, an explosives enhancer, lay in another corner, and in the garage, as promised, was a truck, a yellow German made MAN, matching precisely the description of the vehicle on the Mukhabbarat's search list. The workers had just finished yielding to the front of the truck a frame of hardened steel, the same kind of barrier buster used by Iraqi insurgents to drive truck bombs deep into a targeted building before detonating. The delivery system for Zarqawi's bomb was fully operational. Other raids followed in quick succession. At separate locations a few miles from the warehouse, investigators found other vehicles as well as Jayusi's laboratory. For the latter, the bomb maker had picked a rural site next to a livestock ranch where no neighbor would likely notice if odors escaped from the mixing of chemicals. By now, between interrogations and scraps of recipe notes from the laboratory, Abu Mutaz knew with near precision what the plotters intended. This was to be a suicide bombing like none other, a dirty chemical bomb that blended conventional explosives and poisons, creating a toxic cloud that would kill as it settled over the capital. The epicenter was to be the Mukhabbarat's own headquarters, with the main detonation to take place at a fueling station for the spy agency's vehicles, not far from where Abu Mutaz worked. By the time we found them, they were nearly ready, Abu Mutaz recalled afterward. The plan was to start with an attack on the main gate, using RPGs and small arms to kill the guards. Then the main truck, the man, would destroy the fuel station, followed by the other trucks carrying explosives and poison chemicals in layers. After the explosion, the place would become so toxic that not even the ambulances would be able to enter. It would surpass anything Al Qaeda did anywhere in the world. But there was still a missing piece. The bomb maker had not been found. Jayusi had been careful. Few in the Irbid cell knew his real identity, and none of them knew where he was staying. He used only prepaid calling cards and switched mobile phones every few days to thwart any effort to track his movement. When the raids began, he disappeared into a safe house in Marka, a Palestinian enclave outside Amman, apparently intending to wait out the Mukhabbarat before fleeing or trying again. But by now, the Jordanians had a name, a familiar one at that, along with a photograph they could broadcast on state run television. They also possessed what turned out to be a critical piece of intelligence. Jayusi's wife and children were with him. Precisely how they traced the family to the Marca hideout, an errant phone call, perhaps, or a relative's indiscretion, is unclear. But as night fell on Monday, April 17, 2004, commando teams moved into position around the apartment building with high confidence that the bomb maker was inside. At 2:10 a.m. on April 18, a dozen soldiers crouched with guns drawn as an officer banged loudly at the door. "Police!" the lead officer shouted. The reply was a burst of submachine gun fire through the door, showering the hallway with bullets and splinters. One of the soldiers fell, wounded in the shoulder. The others blasted their way into the apartment. They shot and killed the first defender and then raced through darkened rooms looking for others. They found Jayusi huddled in a bedroom with his wife and children. The man who specialized in designing bombs capable of killing large numbers of innocents made no move in his own defense, clinging instead to the wife he had brought along at great risk. Even as the police moved in, he insisted on keeping his family close, bunking his kids amid boxes of C4 military explosives and the fuses and detonators that were to have been the final ingredients in Zarqawi's history making bomb. Later that morning, Abu Haytham, the intelligence captain who had been the last to meet with Zarqawi before his flight to Pakistan in 1999, peered into an interrogation room to see another face from his past. The suspect sat in his chair, alone now, his hair matted and his eyes puffy from a lack of sleep. But it was the same Jayusi he remembered from years before, clean shaven and a little stouter, this time facing accusations that all but guaranteed that he'd never again live with his wife as a free man. Abu Haytham walked into the cell with a small tray and sat down. The bomb maker looked up briefly, but his expression registered only exhaustion and defeat. This would be easy. The captain slid the tray across the table, putting the honey drenched cheese pastries directly under Jayusi's nose. "Have a kanafeh," he said.